In this tier list, I'll be ranking malls based on my preferences and the public transport access there. More in-depth information on the criteria I'm using can be found in part 1. But in short, I like malls that make me walk 400 meters from end to end with plenty of food and entertainment options and is connected by rapid transit, or at the very least, frequent transit. Malls that fail to provide all-day, everyday transit will get thrown to E tier, but all those malls are in part 1. Speaking of part 1, hopefully this video is an improvement since part 1's graphics honestly don't look very good. I was still experimenting with different styles and it was honestly a bit rushed. Anyway, in tier C+, we have Living World Alam Sutera, directly connected by an angkot line to Ciledug. Meanwhile in Serpong Raya, there's the S11 to Jelambar and Agramas to Pasarubo and Cikarang. Although the mall's footprint seems pretty big, the inside does feel a bit small, partially because much of the space is consumed by an oversized furniture store and a hardware store. The mall has plenty of food options, much more than what you expect for a mall this size. The mall has a cinema, arcade, and the church. There's also plenty of public seating areas, but this mall is not perfect. Parking is very limited, which would be fine if there was adequate public transport to compensate, but there isn't. And I have been denied a spot here. The mall's AC is also a little bit underpowered with many large windows, so the internal temperature does get a kind of warm really, especially in the top floors. Yeah, this mall is kind of a greenhouse. Next is Aeon Tanjung Barat, located near Tanjung Barat train station serving the Bogor Line and Transjakarta Lines 4B, 9H and D21, providing service to Manggarai, Universitas Indonesia, Lebak Bulus, Cibadak, and Pasar Minggu. I'm not sure what I think about what they did with the 9H. Seems pretty inconvenient that they removed direct service to Block M, which is a bus terminal with an MRT station nearby. This area has apartments, which is good because we need more TOD. The train station has an apartment and so does this mall. Although this is a rather small mall, which limits how far it can go up in this tier list, it does compensate by being in a pretty good state of repair as you would expect for an Aeon mall. The AC is cold, the mall is clean, it has the mandatory Aeon supermarket, and the top floors provide nice views of South Jakarta. Sometimes I stop by this mall to rest when I'm going to or from Bogor. Next is Mall Arta Gading, aka MAG. Nearby is Sunter Kelapa Gading BRT shelter, though the walk there is not the most comfortable. Yes, there is a sidewalk, but you must cross a rather steep bridge that's also pretty wide. The BRT shelters was corridor 10 and 12, and the notoriously infrequent 12P. There's also a lot of microtrans lines to the surrounding neighborhoods, but some of the microtrans stops are just downright bad. A bus stop placed in a bush and you wait on the street. No sidewalk here, typical of Kelapa Gading. At least the microtrans buses come every 5 to 10 minutes, so you won't be spending much time there. The mall's design is pretty interesting, with different sections having different themes: Chinese, Middle Eastern, European. It's also a pretty big mall and you won't mistake it from the outside with its colorful design. But what holds this mall back, besides the questionable pedestrian infrastructure, is the many empty stores on the top floor. Next is Pluit Village, located right next to Pluit BRT shelter, which is the terminus of corridor 9 and 12, and has the unique feature of buses dropping you in the BRT lane, as the bus queue here is massive. The bus stop across the street serves line 1A, 12A, and 12B, providing service to Kota, Senen, and Pik. This is one example of a mall trying to diversify, and the result is that this mall has a lot of interesting features, including a robot park, a go-kart track, a church, a martial arts school, and a place to sort out your driver's license. The mall itself is fine, is clean, and the AC is cold. It's also decently sized, and if they manage to get the top floors filled, I think this mall could get B tier. My first impression of the mall is actually rather positive. This was before the pandemic, and I recall the mall being very crowded, probably because of a durian exhibition. Next is Pejaten Village. A short 250-meter walk away with decent sidewalks is Pejaten BRT shelter, serving corridor 6. This stretch of corridor 6 is particularly frequent as lines 6, 6A, 6B, 6H, and 6V interline here. A nearby non-BRT stop also serves the lines 6T and Microtrans line 95. Yeah, with this kind of line naming scheme, I can see why some KRL commuter line passengers don't even bother with Transjakarta. Anyway, you can go to Ragunan, Balai Kota, Terminal Senen, Pasar Minggu, Velbak, and Lebak Bulus from here. This mall is a perfect demonstration on why tall malls in hot climates get ruined by the laws of physics. The top floors are warm, while the bottom floors are rather cold. But the rest of the mall is fine, especially considering that this mall has been renovated recently and it looks pretty good. The food court also provides nice views of South Jakarta. Next is Margo City, located nearby to Pondok Cina Station, serving the Bogor line, though the walk there is a bit complicated, let's just put it at that, but they did provide a pedestrian bridge to cross the street. All I can say that it's a decently sized mall, that's clean with cold AC and a pretty big time zone, like big enough that it's on 2 floors. I also saw in Google Maps that this mall has a decent outdoor area that for some reason I missed when I went there. And there's also an IMAX theater. Next is Block M Plaza, directly connected to Block M MRT station with Block M Terminal a short walk away. That is the southern terminus of Corridor 1, and also the terminus of a bunch of non-BRT lines as well. Also within the same distance is JSW, the meeting point of the MRT, Transjakarta Corridor 1 and 13, along with way too many non-BRT lines, so I'll just mention the ones that stop right next to this mall. That would be the 8E bound for Bintaro and the 1E bound for Block M Terminal, and the S21 bound for Ciputa. This mall is known for what the MRT has done to it, revive it from the dead. So I find it funny that they use the Singaporean-styled MRT logo for wayfinding inside the mall. You and Pondok Indah get the Jakarta-style wayfinding that Transport for Jakarta has made. Anyway, this mall is one of the few in Jakarta that has the unique spiral layout. You keep walking in the same direction, you will eventually reach the top floor. Also, being a very old mall from the early 90s, it has this Art Deco style to it. Next is Tang City, directly connected with Transjakarta lines T11 and T12, Trans Tangerang lines Corridor 2 and 3, and angkos that go, I'm not even gonna mention it one by one. Absolutely everywhere. Agramas Cikarang Porislan and Mayasaris AC34 also stop here. The mall is doing well. The inside seems to be built in a grid pattern. There's a food court and a small amusement park in the top. It provides nice views of Tangerang City. I mean, it's a good thing that this mall exists because Tangerang City has a noticeable lack of malls that are alive and well. All the good malls are in Tangerang Regency or South Tangerang. Another thing that this mall does well is outdoor space. The outside of this mall is lively, lots of people walking around and live music. Next is Senayan Park, located along but possible walk away from Palmeras and Senayan BRT shelter, and is also served by Transjakarta lines 1B, 1F, and the very new 8N, providing service to Tosari, Bundaran Senayan, Petamburan, and Kebayoran. Also, they did change the 1B to make this weird look to Transport Hub Duku Atas. Why? Anyway, this mall is too small. And I say that not just because I was able to explore the whole thing in about half an hour, but also because it's located right next to a stadium. Yeah, this mall occasionally gets swamped by concert goers, and when that happens, all the restaurants have a waiting list and it's overall not a very pleasant experience. It has a very big playground in the top floor, but the smallest time zone I've ever seen. It naturally does well in the outdoors department because, well, it's in the name. It has a park at the back with a lake, and the top floors provide great views of Jakarta. Great mall, just avoid if there's something going on in GBK. Next is Botani Square Bogor, served by a bunch of angkot lines giving connections such as but not limited to Ciawi, Baranangsiang, and Bubulak. This mall is also served by Transpakuan Corridors 1 and 2 to Ciawi and Baranangsiang. Those buses can be tracked using the Mitra Darat app. There's also buses to Sentul City that run every 30 to 60 minutes and buses to Harja Mukti LRT station. That bus has 2 departures in the morning and 2 in the afternoon and only runs on weekdays. All of those Transpakuan services can be found in Cidangyang bus shelter, located right next to the mall. There's also a small bus terminal right next to the mall, mainly serving buses to both Sukarno, Hatta, and Halim airports. Those buses have hourly departures, and while not directly connected to any rail service, Bogor Station is located a few kilometers away, and there are a couple of direct services from this mall to Bogor Station and back. A rather small mall, and just across the street from Bogor Botanical Gardens, and a long but manageable walk from one of the park's entrances. Despite its small size, the mall is pretty tall, and it does help that the mall feels quite a bit bigger than it actually is. The mall has relatively complete food options, like you would expect for a mall in Jakarta. I'd say this is the best mall in Bogor City, though if we count Bogor Regency, there is one mall that has a clear size advantage over this. Next up is Mall Ciputra Jakarta or Citraland, served by Grogol and Jelambar BRT shelters, serving Transjakarta Corridors 3, 8, and 9, providing service to Kalideres, Monas, GBK, Pluit, Pinang Ranti, Kota, Pulo Gadang, Lebak Bulus, Kebayoran, and Juanda, in short, basically everywhere. Nearby is Grogol Station, but the frequency of the Tangerang line is every 30 minutes off peak. On the other side of Grogol intersection is Grogol Terminal, providing buses to destinations like Bogor, Ciawi, Cibinong. Line S11 also stops near this mall. Another mall with the spiral layout. Keep walking in one direction and you will reach the top floor. Speaking of the top floor, there's a food court there. Unfortunately, most of the views are blocked. This mall has the standard features of a mall in this tier list with the addition of a hotel. Next up is Peak Avenue, directly connected by the notoriously overloaded Transjakarta 1A. Here's a suggestion for Transjakarta: make a new line called the L1A, run it on Sediatmo Highway, and run it every day and run it every 10 minutes. You can even use the Metro Trans buses if you like. It doesn't help that Peak is built in the Americano style, aka white roads that get swamped by cars anyway. Anyway, the mall itself is fine. It has some fancy restaurants in the bottom, maybe the smallest arcade I've seen in the top, but the mall itself is kinda small. Then again, this is Peak. There's plenty of other places to go besides the mall. Next is Metropolitan Mall Bekasi, 650 meters away from Bekasi Barat LRT station. Use that to go to this mall. Don't use the B11 because it will drop you in Bekasi Cyberpark Mall and then you will have to cross this monstrous intersection. Transpatriot buses, which are trackable via the Mitra Darat app, do not stop in this mall. You will need to cross the street to Living Plaza Bekasi to use that. Don't worry, there's a sky bridge, which has the steepest ramp I've ever seen. This mall is pretty average. It has a small theme park at the top floor, though honestly more oriented towards kids, and the AC does somewhat struggle to keep this mall cold. This is not the only mall in Bekasi that struggles to keep its insides cold and just further proof that this city is on a different planet. I did not know when I visited, but there's a shuttle bus service to Grand Metropolitan Mall. I did not know, so I walked another 600 meters to get there, in a narrow sidewalk in Bekasi climate. This brings us to Grand Metropolitan Mall. The only transit seems to be the shuttle bus mentioned earlier and some angkots to Kampung Melayu. Anyway, having a sidewalk this narrow is morally wrong. I should also mention that there's a housing complex between the two malls, and to the south there's a highway. That's Indonesian urban planning for you. Anyway, Grand Metropolitan Mall provides great views of the highway, the LRT, and the high-speed train. This mall also manages to keep its insides cold, so congratulations on that. This mall is also pretty big, it's tall, it has all the basic features as you would expect in a mall of this tier, plus an amusement park and a ballroom. This mall's interior design is pretty modern. You walk inside and it feels like a high-end mall in Jakarta. And speaking of high-end malls, moving up to tier B-, we have Plaza Indonesia, located right next to Bundaran HI MRT station and Bundaran HI BRT shelters, serving lines 1, 9D, 6A, and 6B. There's also a very wide sidewalk in front of the mall, so pretty much S-tier transit here. Bundaran HI BRT shelter also is a tourist attraction on its own. I mean, the whole area is rather Instagrammable. Most of the mall is just boutiques and fancy restaurants. This is to be expected for a mall that has a sign saying Louis Vuitton in the front. Most of the relatively affordable stuff is in the basement. This mall might also win the most confusing layout award. This is the only mall where I have to use a compass app on my phone to get around. South to Grand Indonesia, which is rightfully a couple of tiers above this mall, and east to all the transit. Still in the high-end mall streak is Plaza Senayan. The 8N stops right in front of the mall, and a short walk away is Bundaran Senayan BRT shelter and Senayan MRT station. Sudirman has very good sidewalks and there's a pedestrian shortcut via the parking lot of some office building to this mall. Bundaran Senayan BRT shelter serves lines 1, 1F, 6M, 6V, 9C, and 10H. Some regional buses also stop here, like the one to Bekasi that I do occasionally see, and the one to Cileungsi, which is a lot less common for some reason. Another rather shopping-heavy mall, I'd say the fancy restaurant selection isn't on par with Plaza Indonesia or its neighbor Senayan City. They do have a food court serving you food that you would normally see in the food courts of regular malls, something Plaza Indonesia noticeably lacks. Mall's interior is very fancy, sort of the old-style 90s Indonesia mall style with the marble everything. I actually used to frequently go here. Nice place to wait for the T11. Also, this mall has the clock that shows some moving statues every once in a while. Next up is Senayan City, basically the same as Plaza Senayan in terms of transit, but you got to cross a 6-lane road to get there. I have nostalgia from this mall partially because this is one of the malls I frequently went to in my childhood, and also because of a certain Podomoro advertisement that everyone born around the 2000s knew about. Most of the malls I have mentioned lack outdoor spaces, but Senayan City manages to make this lagoon thing, which provides good outdoor walking spaces. It's not much, but it's the best a downtown mall with limited land can do. Last in this streak of luxury malls is Pacific Place. The closest bit of transit would be the Istora Mandiri MRT station. If we're talking BRT, the mall is located within GBK and Polda Metro Jaya BRT shelters. So in terms of transit, the same as the Senayan malls, minus the 8N but plus the 3F. Pacific Place also has good pedestrian access because of the wide sidewalks and I recall there's some sort of tunnel leading directly to this mall from said sidewalk. Nostalgia factor is pretty high for this mall because of Kidslandia, the theme park where children pretend to be adults, and I have went there before as a child. The mall's pretty big. There's even a replica of a boat inside the mall in the food section, but it is still a very shopping heavy mall. And it has a pretty strange flaw. There are no public seating areas, so the opposite of Living World Alam Sutra. Next is Lotte Mall Jakarta. No rapid transit here, but you do get a couple of non-BRT lines like the 5F, the 6K, and the 6D, providing destinations to Tebet, Tanah Abang, Kuningan, Karet, and Senayan. Though I've heard bad things about the 5F's frequency and to a lesser extent the 6D. The good news is that pedestrian infrastructure is decent, much better than another big mall in Kuningan that we will discuss later. So when I think of this mall, I think of arts and exhibitions. Because the first time I went here was for a field trip during my senior high school years. I was an art student and the teacher brought us to the gallery here. The second time I went here was because I went with a bunch of friends to see an exhibition. I got sick of waiting and I just left the group to do my ritual of walking the mall end to end, top to bottom. The mall's layout is also pretty interesting. There's this center island with an arcade and a kids play area, and the floors just orbit around this central area. A very sci-fi-ish mall interior. I think the Korean styled area, basically like a Korean theme place where you can do selfies, is also in this mall. But it has been a long time since I've been here, also again with the spelling durian statue. Next is Gandaria City, the most inconveniently placed mall in South Jakarta. It is surrounded by rapid transit, but very few, actually none, actually go to this mall. Kebayoran station is 900 meters north, 800 meters away is Kebayoran and Velbak BRT shelters, and nearly a kilometer away south is Bungur BRT shelter. The transit that actually does go here, like the 8N, 1Q, 8E, and a couple of microtrans lines, are not rapid transit. They get stuck in traffic and many have long wait times. Now, unfortunately, you can use the 8N to go to Kebayoran, and you can use the Jak 93 Angkot to go from Kebayoran to this mall. But really, this mall should have a BRT shelter, since it's a major trip generator. Also, pedestrian access is poor, narrow sidewalks, and you gotta navigate a lot of stuff that was clearly designed for cars. The mall itself is fine, layout is a bit confusing. I've been here in my childhood once because of Jackson Galaxy. Yeah, the guy from the TV show My Cat from Hell went here. There's an IMAX theater, but apart from that, it does feel like this mall is somewhat overshadowed by Pondok Indah. Remember what I said about the other big mall in Kuningan? Yeah, this is the one. Getting from the bus stop to the mall involves going through a bunch of narrow sidewalks surrounded by cars. Transit is the same as Lotte Mall Jakarta, minus the 6K but at the 6Q to Duku Atas. This mall is pretty close to the bus station and many lines from this mall actually go there. So that's one advantage this mall has over Lotte Mall Jakarta. This mall is massive. There are wider malls, but this mall is also tall, and it's also pretty crowded. Of course, all good malls are crowded to an extent, but this is to the point of minor discomfort. But what I do like is the architecture of this mall. You go in and you're greeted by this massive food area with a tall ceiling. Next up is Aeon JGC, Jakarta Garden City. The only transit that stops in front of this mall is the 110A Microtrans line to Pulau Gebang Terminal. According to Google Maps, a regular angkot line also stops nearby of this mall and it goes to Pulau Gadung Terminal. No rapid transit in sight, but MRT Phase 3 might pass nearby of this mall in the future. In the near future actually, because of I think MRT Phase 3A is gonna go to Medan Satria. So this mall has a Ferris wheel, decent rooftop outdoor space, and there's also an outdoor promenade with cafes. Pretty good considering the mall's pretty average in size. But what I don't like about this mall is the interior design. Not a fan of the black ceilings. Next is Emporium Pluit, directly connected to Transjakarta Corridors 9 and 12, the non-BRT lines 3D and 1A, but only to the direction of PIC. Getting from Penjaringan BRT shelter to the mall is kind of a challenge. You have to cross the street twice, and you gotta navigate a long winding pedestrian path. I like to call this mall middle class Senayan City, because it really does look like Senayan City. I know this is like the second time I said that. The first one was like to Pesona Depok, but I mean this is built by the same developer as the ones that built Senayan City. Just get rid of all the boutiques and replace them with restaurants, some of which provide great views of North Jakarta. Also, they managed to fit 2 arcades here. Pretty impressive considering the limited space and the fact that its elite cousin has 0. Next is Lipo Mall Kemang, a mall that I originally planned to put in B+, but I dropped it down a tier because of the walk from the bus stop to this mall is a pain in the rear end. And I had a minor incident on the walk there. So I just got off the 6N, which by the way is the only line serving this mall. Walk down a narrow street, constantly conflicting with motor vehicles. Then I reached the part where there's a steep slope down and I accidentally stepped on some flowing water, and it went all over the place. That was water overflowing from the gutters. This is vile. Really, everyone has it bad from this mall, even drivers because they get stuck in traffic. The mall itself is good, it's modern, it has a nice outdoor area flanked by many cafes. There's a school inside the mall too, but the access, holy. Next is Cibinong City Mall, mainly connected by angkots. One line goes to Cibinong Station, but the frequency of the service as well. Just look at the schedule. And if you want to go to the frequent part of the Bogor line, you need to transfer through multiple angkot lines. Also, according to Google Maps, those regional buses that go to Cibinong don't even stop at this mall. There's also the airport bus here. But the mall itself is pretty good. The mall is 300 meters long end to end. The inside also looks quite a bit bigger than the outside since there's an entire floor underground filled with many stores. It has all the standard features you would expect of a mall this size, plus a hotel, 2 arcades, and a huge furniture store in the top floor. Next is Trans Studio Mall Cibubur, mainly served by angkots, but it is really close to Buperta Cibubur and Cibubur Junction, where you can find the 7C, 7V, and D11. Pedestrian access is alright. You do share the same entrance with cars, but it's a short walk, so it's fine. So the rest of the mall again is fine. It's modern, a bit shiny, lots of Japanese food options in the food area above, but the main attraction is the theme park. Yes, that is a roller coaster sticking out of the mall. Though I find it funny that the first thing you see when you ride it and it exits the mall is the hospital across the street. Next is Aeon Mall BSD, served by BSD Link shuttle buses. Most lines drop you outside the mall and you gotta walk in. But BSD, at least the newer part of it, has good sidewalks. One line that just goes back and forth between ICE, Aeon, and the Breeze does stop inside the mall at the lobby. Also, there seems to be a disconnect between the people managing the traffic around the mall and BSD Link. Like one time I tried to save a bit of money by waiting for the BSD Link bus to get me halfway home to Gading Serpong. But because they closed the road in the side of the mall, the BSD Link buses skipped my stop and I was forced to spend 80,000 rupiah on a ride home. I don't know if this still happens, but yeah, it's worth pointing out because ghosting your passengers is a sin. I frequently go here, probably my second most visited mall after SMS, mainly because of Aeon Supermarket. It has what you expect for an Aeon mall. It's clean, lots of toilets, clear wayfinding, and it's not covered by the ugly dark ceilings that some other Aeon malls have. The downside of this mall is that it occasionally gets way over capacity. Right next to Aeon Mall is ICE. If there's an event, especially a concert there, yeah, don't go here. Moving up to tier B+, we have Aeon Sentul City, served by Transpakuan buses connecting it to Cidangyang Terminal. I've also seen angkot stop in front of this mall, but I'm not sure on where they actually go. I did not use public transport to go here. Also, I can't say much because I mainly spent my time here in a restaurant, not much actual exploring. So what I can say is that it's big, it has outdoor spaces, and it's very crowded. Next is Taman Anggrek, served by Tanjung Duren BRT shelters, the meeting points of Corridor 9 and 8, and serving lines 3F, 8M, 9A, 9E, along with the 8K and S11 also stopping in the non-BRT bus shelter. The walk from the shelter to the mall is not the best. First you arrive in Central Park, before then crossing the street and into a narrow sidewalk, and then crossing another street before finally reaching the lobby of the mall, frequently conflicting with cars. Taman Anggrek is a huge mall, mainly due to its height. It has the 90s style with marble floors. It has all that you would expect for a mall, plus an ice skating rink and an IKEA. The main problem here is that this mall does seem to struggle to recover from the pandemic. The mall remains well under capacity visitor-wise, and many stores remain empty. I think they should build a skybridge within this mall in Central Park to help disperse the crowds a bit. Notice this number, this is now a top 10 video. All the malls before this are not ranked in order, just in tiers, but now we get to my top 10 favorite malls. Next is Sumarekon Mall Bekasi, or SMB, the terminus of the B11 and Transpatriot Corridor 1. Why do I feel bad for this now unused bus shelter? The mall's AC struggles to keep this mall cold, but besides that, it really looks like they just copy-pasted the second phase of mall SMS. When I go here, my mind just short-circuits because it feels like home even though I know I'm on the other side of the city. I go inside and I see Star Department Store, Downtown Walk, Food Temptation, IMAX Theater. Now, there is the issue of size. It is small compared to SMS and MKG, but the second phase of this mall is under construction, so we'll see how that goes. Next is Puri Indah, also the terminus of the 3E and Microtrans Line 50. If you want to go to the Tangerang line, use the Microtrans. If you want to get to Corridor 3, use the 3E. But what I find frustrating about transit in Puri is that all of it goes north. Where's the buses going south? Why not extend the 1M here? Or transit east to Kebonjeruk so I can get off the S11 and use the bus to go here. West Jakarta's transit is unusually disconnected. It's a future video idea. Basically a mini Pondok Indah. It has the 90s Indonesian mall style. It has decent outdoor space with cafes, something that Pondok Indah noticeably lacks. Layout is kind of confusing. I don't know why, but once I'm inside, I have a hard time finding the exit. This is the only mall I know that is in the shape of the letter Y. Nostalgia factor is very high for me, at least, because every so often my family would go here. This mall also benefits from proximity to Lipo Mall Puri. You can literally just walk to that mall if you're bored. They're also currently expanding. The second building should be done later this year. Next is Super Mall Karawaci. The T11 bound for Pori stops nearby, and there are angkots here going to parts of Tangerang City and Gading Serpong. The place where you wait for the angkots is relatively pleasant, as the sidewalk is wide and there's plenty of trees. This mall is where Southeast Asia's largest time zone is. There's a roller coaster inside the mall. This mall also has an entire section dedicated to electronics, and in that area is a shooting range. Well, this mall is called Super for a reason. I guess the only thing I can complain about this mall is that the interior does feel a little bit bland, and that Lego Road is in a state of perpetual congestion and roadworks. So much so that for me, sometimes it's faster to go to Aeon Mall PSD, located twice as far from my house compared from this mall. Moving up to tier A- is Sumarekon Mall Serpong, directly connected to angkots headed to Karawaci and Serpong Raya, where you can catch Transjakarta and Agramas, and the mysterious R06B angkot that I mentioned in the last video. Other transit includes this utterly useless shuttle bus, and the bus to Citra Raya that runs every 1 to 2 hours. Pedestrian access is actually pretty good, considering the rest of Gading Serpong has basically anatomized walking. There's even a sky bridge to Serpong M-Town. This is my home mall. It is massive at 400 meters long, lots of outdoor spaces that also stretch for the entire length of the mall. The size advantage also means that it doesn't suffer from the same overcapacity problems like say Aeon BSD. There's plenty of food options. Recently a lot of fancy restaurants have also opened, and it's starting to make this mall feel like one of those high-end Jakarta malls. This mall also has an IMAX theater and a field for events and concerts. Next is Lipo Mall Puri. Transit is basically the same as Puri Indah, but for the Jak 50 angkot you will need to walk a bit to this mall. This mall is massive. You walk inside to the north side, and then you're greeted by several floors of shops and restaurants orbiting a central island. Meanwhile, the southern side has this nice outdoor area. Parts of the mall is on this bridge connecting the two main buildings, and there's a massive underground area filled with so many restaurants. This mall has 4 arcades, and if you're bored of this mall, you can always walk to Puri Indah for a different aesthetic. Also, this mall has the most advanced map. Like in the mall, there's this screen that shows a 3D map of the whole mall which you can move around. Next is Bintaro Exchange, directly connected to Jurang Mangu Station with this very nice tunnel. There's also an in-trans buses that I never used, and Angkot to Ciputat and Transpark Bintaro. It has an aquarium, ice skating rink, a park. This mall was recently expanded, and that basically threw this mall a couple of tiers up. Previously it was C+. One thing that might be holding this mall back is the first mall's underpowered AC. It's barely cold inside. The problem doesn't seem to be the case in the second building, which I think also has an IMAX. Also, imagine exiting the tunnel and you see this. Best mall entrance ever. Moving up to tier A+, we have Pondok Indah, directly connected to Pondok Indah BRT shelter, serving corridors 8 and line S21. Pedestrian infrastructure, however, is a bit less friendly. Trying to get in or out of this mall as a pedestrian is kind of a nightmare actually, due to the narrow sidewalks and the fact that the whole thing is just surrounded by walls. Unfortunately, this part of Corridor 8 is just bad. No bus lanes, and Pondok Indah bus shelter really needs an upgrade. This bus shelter should be twice as long as it currently is. This mall is split up into 4 buildings connected by bridges that contain stores and restaurants. There's a water park behind one of the buildings, a very big playground in this one, lots of fancy restaurants, multiple food courts. The bridge between the second and third malls is a bit of a bottleneck, and it's so crowded that you start wondering if you have been transported to some alternate universe Tanah Abang. The walk from the end of Mall 3 to the end of Street Gallery is about 800 meters. Next is Grand Indonesia, located a short walk away from Bundaran Hi MRT stations, and about 500 meters away is Duku Atas, that has Duku Atas MRT station, Beni City and Sudirman commuter line stations. And across the bridge is Duku Atas LRT station. It's kinda a long walk and at this point, but there is a sidewalk. There's also Tosari BRT shelter serving lines 1, 1B and 6B. Pedestrian access is also good due to the wide sidewalks. This mall is huge. It is divided into two main buildings connected by a bridge. Layout is a bit confusing as you do get the two buildings confused from each other. Lots of fancy restaurant. It has a small theme park, but it's very kids oriented. This is no Trans Studio. There's a 5-star hotel on the top of the mall. End-to-end walk is about 400 meters, but this mall is also very tall, so yeah, you can spend hours exploring this mall. Next up is Central Park, also including Neo Soho. Transit is the same as Taman Anggrek but better since the bridge from Tanjung Duren BRT shelter actually leads directly to the lobby of this mall. I should also mention that Grogol station is somewhat close to this mall, but we all know how frequent the Tangerang line is. Taking transit to this mall is a good idea, even though Tanjung Duren BRT shelter can get dangerously full, and Corridor 9 isn't very well isolated from traffic. Don't even bother going to the lobby or finding a parking spot in this mall, especially on the weekends. There's a good chance that people who take the bus might arrive first. It is in the name. The mall has a park. It wins the award for the best outdoor space of any mall, including fully outdoor malls. Central Park also has a small theme park on the northern end of the mall. The underground section is massive and filled with restaurants and a supermarket. This mall also features a hotel, a church, a university, and office space. The mall is also connected to Neo Soho by a tunnel and a sky bridge. That mall has an aquarium, but admittedly, the rest of the mall is rather empty and struggles to get to the same level of occupancy as Central Park. Central Park is also crowded, like really crowded. This mall is never empty. Plus, if you get bored of this mall, Taman Anggrek is a short walk away. Walking from the south end of Central Park, through the sky bridge, and into the northern end of Neo Soho is about 700 to 800 meters. Every mall in A+ tier has the potential to get S tier. Problem is, Central Park has no rapid transit. Grand Indonesia does not have a big outdoor space. Pondok Indah has neither. Here's a mall that has both. In S tier, we have Sumarekon Mall Kelapa Gading, also including Gavoy and La Piazza, aka MKG. Directly connected to LRT Jakarta, the walk from the LRT station to the lobby of the mall is relatively nice, as you do get a weather-protected sidewalk. There's also a bunch of microtrans lines going absolutely everywhere, and the 12-speed LRT Jakarta is currently being expanded to Manggarai, and once that's done, this mall will be linked to the Greater Jakarta rail network. The walk from La Piazza to Gavoy and all the way to Mall 5 is 800 meters long. Behind the mall is also Gading Walk, a nice outdoor place, sort of like the prototype to the downtown walk scene in the newer Sumarekon malls. This mall was built in stages, so the first mall looks old, the third and the fifth ones look quite similar to Mall SMS, just taller. This makes for an interesting walk as the architecture changes with each new building, and there's ramps to compensate for the different floor heights of each building. There's an IMAX theater, dog park, 2 hotels, and 4 arcades. Gavoy has many food options and is built in an outdoor mall style, and La Piazza has a stage for live music. Thank you for watching this video. It took over 50 hours in total to make both of them. Now I want to see your tier list.